Hello, everyone. Thanks, Hannah. Hey, thanks for everyone joining us today. So, as I mentioned before, if you're looking for The Last of Us, The White Lotus, or an Andor screen cap, that will be a different webinar. Today, we're talking about generative AI, how it helps you map your processes, and then once you have those processes, what can you do with it? So, we've got a couple of experts on the panel today. We have James Gaines from Icon, we have Brian Panisha from nVeris. I myself am the VP of Business Development and Strategy at Icon. We work with nVeris as the second part of a two-stage operation, whereas nVeris can show you quickly where the impediments and bottlenecks are in a process or workflow. Generally, you need to give that to a team to execute, and that can consist of dozens or maybe even hundreds of people. And Icon can bring the support necessary for those teams to prioritize, execute, and sequence that work with minimum impediments so that you get your work out the door faster. That's the short version. I'll turn it over to Brian now for the rest of it.
Great. Well, thanks, Dalen. My name is Brian Panisha, and I'm the Chief Product Officer for nVeris. Just to kind of get us started, I'm going to go ahead and frame this. So our goal is for you to walk away not with spending your time in an hour presentation of slides. We're going to have some slides to get things started, but it's for you to walk away with a hands-on example of how you can drive innovation through extreme collaboration and simulation in your organization. We're going to talk about the problem, and we're having GDP level disruptions more frequently than ever. And then we're going to talk about the solution, how we accelerate that innovation and optimization in everyday organizations. So we'll be in our live simulation for about 35 minutes, but now for a little bit of context. So
before we dive into that, Brian, we wanted to just do a quick poll and learn a little bit about all our attendees today. If all of you can take a look at your screen, we'd love to get an idea of where each of you work. So if you can take a moment, just quickly tell us which of these best describes the industry you currently live in, work in, thrive in. That would help us out as we make this webinar as useful for you as possible.
Great, thank you, Hannah.
Give you one more second to select the one that's most relevant to you. Wonderful. And then just in case you're curious, share those results with everyone. Looks like a lot of you are in professional services. Quite a few of you are in government and defense, as well as manufacturing and financial services and insurance. Thank you so much.
Great, great mix. So I think the slide that we're on, we can see an interesting pattern. The takeaway here is where we maybe had to prepare for GDP level shocks in our businesses, in our supply chains. We had them happening maybe every few years, every 6 or 7 years in the past. And very interestingly, we can see that it's happening almost annually since 2020. Not to say anyone watching the news right now, what's going on in the world, every business is impacted. So enough on that. We're going to turn it over to James to talk about how do we respond to this.
So thank you, Brian. So we've heard from Brian how disruption is accelerating, and this simple graphic shows what typically happens next. First, the disruption hits, right? But do we even recognize it? As operational performance drops, say from full to partial to depleted, companies will face a choice. Some wait it out, hoping everything returns to normal. We call those people disruption reactors. However, others take action and they invest in visibility, agility, and resilience to adapt and move forward. We call those people disruption responders. Both may recover, but the reality is that responders do it almost twice as fast and at half the cost and with better outcomes. So let's talk a little bit about why. You can just go to the next slide. So disruption response over reaction here. We believe the difference lies within how different groups perceive risk. Disruption reactors see disruption as a rare one-off event. Sometimes thinking that things are just unlikely to actually happen again. So they focus mostly on avoiding or accepting that risk. Whereas disruption responders, on the other hand, recognize what Brian pointed out, that disruption is accelerating, becoming more frequent and more normalized. They know it will return, same but different again and again. So that's why responders go beyond just risk avoidance. They also focus on mitigating and even possibly transferring that risk. Ultimately, the difference between reactors and responders comes down to one thing, and it's that risk mindset. So we want to introduce a concept here called AQ. In a word, the world's moving super fast, and we believe companies must go further than just simply adopting that risk mindset. Because even the best risk response still requires one thing: waiting, right? You have to wait for the disruption to occur before you can act. And that delay starts the clock on your recovery. So here's the critical question: will there always be enough time between when disruption hits and when you can return to full operational effectiveness? Today, maybe, but as your industry evolves and as your competitors become more responsive, that window of recovery shrinks. In fact, time to recover becomes your ultimate constraint. That's why the most forward-thinking companies are reframing disruption as strategy, not something to respond to, but something to prepare for and even use. This requires more than agility. It requires AQ. It requires automation, especially the kind with the lights out, cause of adaptivity. This goes beyond change, but actual behavioral shifts and cultural transformation, and agentic AI that doesn't just react, but provides insight to forecast and foresee disruption, right? So this shift from responder, all right, to disruption sensor is the new playbook. And it means evolving your mindset and tool set to not just manage risk, but to anticipate and strategically leverage it. Disruption sensors use AQ to gain early insight, reduce recovery time, and reposition the shock of market risk, innovation, and even geopolitical impact over to competitors who are less prepared, right? So the final note here is crafting your company's disruption strategy before the next disruption hits doesn't just reduce risk, it creates advantage. Back to you, Brian.
Brian, I think you're on mute.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
Oh, thanks. I really love this slide and reframing disruption as competitive advantage. Like, when we showed the slide earlier, we were showing GDP level shocks that are occurring. And we have manufacturing customers right now where they're making billion-dollar factory decisions and had made those decisions. And now they're having to unwind those and figure out different places to build those factories right now. Or to do imports and to simply bring stuff into a port, a subassembly, or a component to put the changes into their ERP systems are massive capital investments to make that happen. But it's also technological, right? So it's AI is moving really fast. And so practicing and rehearsing your response to agility, adaptivity, agentic AI, these things built into your arsenal are going to be the things that power you for the future.
That's right.
So we're going to jump into a simulation, and I'm going to turn it over to Hannah to run another quick poll so we can pick what we're going to simulate.
Thanks, Brian. Relaunch this real quick. All right, on your screen, which simulation would you like to run? We have 4 options to choose from. Would you like to see a global manufacturer improve their resilience to supply chain shocks, consumer product company create wearable AI devices, create market fit analysis. County government, address wildfire response operation improvements. Or financial services, address small business lending with reduced risk and higher margins. You select the context, we'll select the response. Give you just a few seconds. We've got everyone's pouring in their answers. Maybe 2 more seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. All right. And end. Let's see what everyone selected. Global manufacturer. Global manufacturer, improving resilience to supply chain shocks. All right, Brian, take it away.
All right. So I got a folder set up, and there's something here so that we have a canned example that we can look at where the collaboration that we're going to participate in has been fully gone all the way through to scoring, and they've done some improvement cycles so we can actually see the financial trending and ROI of those improvements. But for us, I'm going to go ahead and put us into a new scenario, and we'll go ahead and paste it in. Whoops, wrong one. So we have our global manufacturing example. And all I'm doing right now is, if you've ever been in a workshop and you kick out an idea and you ask the group to start, who's going to go first, who's going to pick the first step, and you get crickets, right? Maybe you have to explain it, or somebody's got to lean into it. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this prompt, global manufacturing, from sales forecasting through build to stock production, so that the unit of value is ready to ship products. And I'm going to say, go ahead and generate that map. And that could have been anything. It could have been launching a satellite into orbit, doing custom home construction, electrical utility construction. And what the AI did, and it's a secure AI, we have an API. We're currently using OpenAI, but we can use different models, and our enterprise customers can change the model. But what it did is it went out and looked at about 14 trillion features from all available public information. And it started with a trigger, and it said sales forecasting is initiated. And we're going to do some analysis of the historical sales data, identify marketing trends, develop our forecast, review that with our production team. And these are all the standard things. So you're going to procure those materials, schedule production, initiate the production process. This is a pretty good, if you've been around manufacturing or ERP, this is a pretty good approximation of a pretty standard process for most manufacturing companies. So we're going to go ahead and get started right into refining and optimizing. So what just happened here for us is really powerful. We didn't have to train on the concepts of what are operational value streams or customer journeys. We just got right in, and in about 20 seconds, we're able to kick off a collaboration. But before we do that, I'm going to do a couple things, and I'm just going to use some basic flow metrics so that we can create simulations. And as you are immersed in this and you're coming up with your own ideas from your mobile device or your laptop, we're going to be able to see the opportunity value of these different scenarios so that we can make better decisions on how to improve this manufacturing process. So we'll say maybe they're building some sub-assemblies, some manufactured goods, and it's about a 30-day process to go from forecast through it's ready to stock. And our flow efficiency, and these are pretty much averages. So this is the amount of time waiting for materials, waiting for approvals, maybe coordinating with suppliers, maybe getting feedback from key distribution partners. So we'll just leave that at 70% of the time, if you were to step back, would be waiting for information, materials, or handoffs. And 30% is actual productive processing time. Every organization will be different from that. And then last, we're going to look at what percentage of time does this go from a forecast all the way through to a manufactured good on the shelf or ready to ship. without having to go back and do any level of rework. So I'll raise that a little bit. We'll say this manufacturer has a 40% complete and accurate all the way through. So the next thing we're going to do for our quick modeling when we get into the simulation is what's our production rate. So we'll say this company produces 12,000 units a year. And that'll allow us to look at our capacity. And now I'll just put in some numbers that we could use. So we'll consider this a pretty substantial manufacturer. We'll say they're doing about, well, we'll call it $500 million in their operating budget, their materials, their staff, their OpEx to run the system that produces this. And we'll say they make a pretty good margin. We'll go ahead and make it a full $1 billion of revenue. All right. So we have a model that we can go ahead and get started. So what I'm going to do now is we're all not going to watch me type. We're actually going to get started into a collaboration. So I'm going to go ahead and put into the chat and make sure I send this out to everyone. And you can, if you have the ability to join from a laptop screen and watch the webinar on a different monitor, you're welcome to do that for those folks that have that set up. But if anyone has their phone handy, you can go ahead and scan this QR code to come right in. And we'll go ahead and I can even see how many collaborators have joined. And I'll go ahead and put the QR code back up. And we've got folks coming in as anonymous, and we do that for the brain science. Sometimes you get into a company and people are a little bit afraid, that being anonymous sometimes can help. And when you're facilitating these workshops, which we hope you do, they're really powerful. That can be a powerful tool. Once people get really used to this and they get into a group of people collaborating on a cadence, they also just identify who they are. So we've got about 10 or so people coming in, maybe 20. We'll give that another second or two. I'll keep the QR code up. And all right. So we've got a lot of collaborators. And now basically, just so folks get a sense of the mapping, if you put yourselves in the shoes, let's role play here. You're part of a manufacturing company. And maybe there's a step you don't see. It's very easy. You can just click in between the steps to add a step. And you could go ahead and put a name in, right? Put your initials, your anonymous nickname, and just say, hey, I'm going to add this step. I just want you to get a sense of how easy this is. And you'll see that this is identified the functional groups. And as we're optimizing a process, the greatest delay in most organizations is the handoffs across complex distributed organizations. They'll have layers of management. They'll have different functional groups that specialize in certain areas or steps of a large complex process. And they might even be geographically distributed. And we find over time that most organizations, that's where the opportunity lies. That's where the gold lives. So I see folks making some changes. You can click in, maybe your procure raw materials. You use a specific tool for that. So I'll just pick something. Maybe it's the MRP system. And just to give a quick example, I'll go ahead and add that. And I'm going to go ahead and just stop the exercise. I wanted to get everybody to get a sense of this. And you could easily move cards. So when you're doing this on your own, in your own collaborations, we'll usually set a timer for about 2 or 3 minutes if you have a 10-person group. And that process, that map, that flow becomes yours. All right. It doesn't look like there are any questions coming in. So I'm going to just keep right on going. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put us into a scoring round. And this takes everybody that I just facilitated through the mapping exercise to make it fit your process. And now we're going to ask you to identify your role and from your perspective, score the process. So I'm going to score the process and I'll give a real quick overview on what you're going to be asked. So, and you can skip. So when you're doing this in your groups, some people may feel uncomfortable scoring another area or function's role. But we like to say in the groups, well, you must have an opinion. You might be upstream, you might be downstream, you might have an opinion, and we'll show you once the metrics are captured, how easy it is to see the distribution of that. So it's pretty self-explanatory, but I'll go over one that's been scored. So what we're saying is this is the non-productive wait time. Remember, we had said, you know, out of this 30 days, we have about a 4.2 days of wait time. What is the actual productive value added time? And that's important for looking at your flow efficiency. And then what percentage is that step complete and accurate, meaning the next step in the process can work without having to come back to you to reperform that step. So let's go ahead and get scores in, and I might come join you to work on this. See, we're getting scores. Some folks are jumping ahead. That's great. And I'll go ahead and I'll just set a timer just so you get a sense of what that looks like. If it takes us a little bit longer, that's okay. And put yourself in the shoes of a manufacturing company. And maybe you're in finance. We saw some people were in technology. Maybe you consult to some technology companies or manufacturing companies with their technology. And we'll go ahead and let folks get some more in. And what's happening here is you're getting very diverse perspective. I get asked the question, well, couldn't we just wire this up to all of our manufacturing systems or any process? Maybe you're booking reservations or you're running a chain of restaurants. It really could be any industry. That's expensive. To get that precise inflow of metrics is very expensive. And so this is a way to make the data be what's owned by the group of collaborators. And I'll talk about that when we end the scoring round, because the value really lies in the differences of opinions and the discussions that happen. So we've got a couple more steps to fill out. I'll maybe just help us along. And let's see. So we've got a good set of data. I'm going to go ahead. If anybody's adding, so what it's doing in each step is it's aggregating all of the response. And then I'll even show you a distribution plot by functional group. Different functional groups will have different perspectives, and that's where the gold lies. That's where the collaboration is really powerful. All right, we'll go ahead and I'll just pause the collaboration. And we're not even 10 minutes in, and we could already see, and this is not untypical, producing raw materials often is the biggest bottleneck. This is the biggest constraint on the system in what we just did in this exercise. Developing the sales forecast, step 3 came in second. So why do we have this? Why is this powerful? Well, in any complex system, I talked a moment, it's the handoff between different functional groups, maybe different distributed groups, maybe vendor groups in where you have the greatest potential to optimize. And in most organizations, it might be the group or the function that has the biggest budget, or it might be we just feel like, you know, we want to do a lot with data, so we'll just keep optimizing step 1 or, you know, step 8, scheduling production. And in complex systems, if you don't step back and look holistically, optimizing on these other areas actually causes the overall throughput of the system to degrade and go down. And there's a really famous quote by Gene Kim, and I'll paraphrase him. He said, trying to optimize anything but the single greatest constraint in the system is an illusion. Meaning good money will follow good money on trying to improve performance on something that's actually going to be counterintuitive and reduce performance. So you really quickly are able to share with your group and step back and look at where your bottlenecks are, and very often they're hidden bottlenecks. You could also see where the biggest wait time bottleneck is. So flow time bottleneck uses the total of the performance and then including quality. And then the wait time bottleneck is just the highest delay, waiting for materials information. And often this is one of the lowest ones to fix because it's just about communication and collaboration. So let's step back a little bit. I mentioned to you, you also get a really good plot of the different roles that came in and scored this. So we can see, and this is like a funnel. So the greatest divergence of our audience, of the folks that participated, was the people that were that identified themselves as manufacturing roles had the least favorable perspective on identifying the market trends. And, that probably would make sense. It'd be like, I'm the group that sets up the tooling and the changeover. And when it doesn't go right, I might feel that, well, the market trend data wasn't right? We weren't getting the best performance because we weren't picking the right things to build. And our tooling and switchover process is expensive. And we see that the marketing team, or marketing scores, actually scored the market trends the most favorable. So what do we do with this? These are really good people to put into a collaboration or a breakout when I take you into that, of identifying scenarios and ways that we can improve. So this becomes, over time, as you do this on a recurring cadence, this will become more aligned and more team-shaped as the team learns from each other. And I want to mention that a lot of times you'll see in optimization and value stream, or any type of strategic improvement workshop, we tend to see a lot of organizations invest in it, and they create a lot of pretty pictures. They do a lot of things in sticky notes or murals or Miro boards, but they don't do it consistently. They don't drive action. They don't move people to action and make shared commitments on continuous improvement and continuous learning. So we just did a really,
Brian, a question for you and James. When we think about these feedback loops that are triggered when we have these cross-functional groups in a room looking at this process for the first time together, I'm curious to hear from you and from James how, seeing this divergence for the first time together, what are some of the questions or some of the conversations that get triggered when these groups are looking at this for the first time? What are some of those conversations you hear for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, I could do a really quick one. One is, it's sometimes shock. We've had multiple clients where they'll go grab a C-suite executive. I have one that's a very powerful example. They mapped out their employees that make top dollar for a global IT consultancy, and they had a 19-step process to get their expenses reimbursed. And when the leadership saw it, and how they were causing people to not have time with their families and their weekends to recharge and be able to go back out on the road and lead really large engagements and be there as a solution designer for some of the top companies in the world, it moved them to action. The CEO said, this has got to stop right now. And they went from a 19-step process to a 3-day process, simply because they could quantify the waste and see it visually.
And James, how do your clients react when they see that sort of divergence all in one place? How do they react?
Yeah, they, but Brian's spot on that the opportunity essentially later,
Oh, I think we,
but, but then there are just as many situations in my experience where you have leaders like Brian who describe where they're responding in a proactive way of, oh, this, this. I've also had leaders recognize that in order to improve the process, it requires some degree of cross collaboration among the different people. In organizations where that is culturally difficult, the leaders have kind of felt a little bit stuck because they want to make the change, but they may not have the political capital to bring together all the different sort of factions and create that soft view or soft functioning teaming to break down the silos and to eradicate this thing. So it's definitely really a lot of it hinges how ready is the culture for the scope of change gestures.
and James, I'm
Can you let it?
gonna cut in because your audio is a bit choppy.
Oh, okay.
So maybe between this, Hannah, and the next question, maybe James, you can check your auto. But I think we got it. Like it's having that space in the culture for this to happen can be a challenge, and sometimes leaders can't see the value of, hey, we're going to put you in a tool and do a collaboration with this AI mapping tool. Start small, start with your team, get a couple of functional groups to come together. And this is all in our guide. And then just like we had with that big global IT company, they had many others, and we have many other stories of now where leaders sit into these, but you're not going to have that maybe in the very first time you do it. So you want to practice. So what I'm going to move us into is scenario generation. And this, Hannah, I think also would be a great way to, how do you get people to move? And so a lot of times we'll just create scenarios. So we have a baseline of this process and we've refined it and mapped it. But I can fire off, let's just do 1 year of best practices, 3-year technology improvements. And so this is where you could go into breakout groups, maybe take some of those groups that had a very diverse score and pair them up and ask them to, how do we improve it? And you could chat, you could prompt the AI for any type of improvement. I just fired off a couple to get to, so you can see the scenario modeling. And right here, and I'll just zoom out a little bit, we have, okay, well, let's reimagine this process with 3 years of technology improvements into the future, right? What would that do? Or reimagine this with best practices that we could reasonably implement within 1 year. How does it know this? It knows it from the articles and white papers and case studies and the public information that's available out there in the manufacturing space. So the really powerful thing that I just want to kind of drive home, and we could have created any, if maybe somebody wants to chat in one or put one in the chat, Hannah, let me know. But I'm going to go ahead and show how once you create 2 or 3 breakout groups in your workshop and they're ideating and they're using the AI to reimagine any process, you can quickly move the dial. It could say, well, all right, if we're going to do 3 years of technology improvements, maybe that'll cut our expected flow time down and it'll remove our active productive time up significantly, and it'll raise our complete and accurate to a higher value. And so in this scale, for this organization, and let's remember, this is like $1 billion plus organization, that created a $260 million opportunity value. I'll just do another one. Maybe this cuts it down even more, raises the quality much higher, and raises the activity time more. And this isn't so that you're going to make a decision, and this is exactly what we're going to do. It's to get the creative collaboration going, get the those people maybe that had a very diverse perspective to come together with an idea in the workshop. Let's pause there. Any questions coming in? And then we're going to do another really cool thing. So we're going to put everybody into another collaboration. All right. So now what we're going to do is, with good data of our current state and some, we've modeled some future opportunities, just as a broad stroke, how would we reimagine the overall process? And we've gotten some scoring on it. We can do a voting round. So before I jump into the voting round, I just want to remind folks, we talked about addressing the top bottlenecks. So it's generally going to be step 7 and 3, or step 7 and 3 is the wait time bottleneck. We can even see, and this isn't to pick on somebody, if we apply systems thinking and we're doing this on a cadence, we want to identify, we don't want to point fingers at sales. This is about transparent collaboration and cross-functional cooperation to improve a holistic system. That's where the gold lies. It's not in optimizing the individual functions, but how do we get groups, cross-functional groups, to come together to agree on what to change and then support each other in its implementation. So maybe sales needs help. What are powerful questions we can ask? If sales had a magic wand, what would perfect look like? What could the other groups be doing to have a better understanding of what sales needs, right? These are all the things that you want to start creating that T-shaped, that E-shaped team. So you want to remind the group of where the bottlenecks are. You could export this data and send it out. But step 7 and 3 are the biggest bottlenecks. And then we're going to go back, and I'm going to set a timer, and we'll just do a 1-minute timer. And we'll go ahead and put everybody into a dot voting round. So now everybody gets 2 votes on the collaboration. Where do you maybe need more information? Or where would you, if you only had a limited amount of funding to do an improvement that fits in a 1-month cadence, where would you apply those precious 2 votes? All right, so now everybody's voting. And so if you go back to your mobile device or your other screen, you're able to, with everything that we shared and we talked about where the biggest bottleneck was, you're able to go ahead and apply some dot votes. And this is a way to really quickly, so why do we do dot voting? You know, it's a powerful collaboration tool. It lets you prioritize areas for action from a diverse group's perspective.
Brian, would you mind pulling up the QR code again for people who might have closed it on their devices?
Oh, and you have dot voting paused. Yeah, I need to turn it on.
Oh, you know what? My bad, guys. We have powerful capabilities where you could pause to bring people to something. I didn't unfreeze it. So you shouldn't have to come back in. And we'll go ahead and let folks dot vote. And now I'm wondering why it was crickets. All right. And, you know, I think that just kind of gives the idea. So as a facilitator, if you have a good facilitator that remembers to turn on the session, you really get that diverse perspective. And so I think we get the idea of the votes, and we are seeing a concentration on the materials procurement. That's what you want to drive. That's where the gold lies. That's going to improve the overall throughput of the system more than any other investment. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put us into our brainstorming. And we believe we are the first application in the world that lets every individual in the collaboration collaborate with the AI independently and use that to inform or match that up with your own ideas and create a brainstorming backlog of improvements for this operations, for this manufacturing operations. So now everybody, you can click on a step, and I already see it coming in. You can generate improvement ideas. And what's happening here is the AI isn't replacing you, but it's you saying, go sift through the 14 trillion pieces of information across all of the publicly available information on this domain, this topic, this particular step, And you can then import that. You can copy it. You can put it into your own suggestion for an improvement. And look at this. We're just in a few minutes here. We've got a lot of really meaningful actions for where we can bring folks back, and we can start to maybe do a share back, have people explain their improvement that they came up with, how they use the AI, or if they came up with their own, and start to think about the relative opportunity value for that improvement and how complicated in the job size. So very, very powerful tool. We got enough suggestions to kind of come in. And what I want to point out here too is the AI automatically, when you use it to generate suggestions, will generate suggestions that will fit in the improvement loop. So this was about creating AI visualization and simulation for innovation in a closed loop feedback system. So if you start with customer journeys and different segments of your operations and drill down into detailed development and supporting value streams, if you get your collaborators agreeing for that level and scale, whether they should be improving and meeting quarterly or monthly, the improvements that you generate are going to be sized based on all the available information in the model to realistically fit in that time frame. So we've got some, so let's kind of maybe talk through them. So I'll pause the collaboration again. It sort of ends the collaboration part, and we'll look at the improvements. So we did talk about the steps, so I'll just go ahead and sort it by step. And we'll take a look at step 7. That was the one that had the most votes and also had the greatest bottleneck. And so rightly, these are the ones that we should be looking at right out of the gate to make a commitment. So quick review of supplier current lead times, identify any consistently longer than expected, work with the suppliers to ensure options for reducing lead times. This is really good. This is collaboration and partnering with your suppliers, always a good thing. And here's one to do maybe some just-in-time inventory alerts. So we're getting advanced inventory, and when we see thresholds fall below a certain level, we're letting the production team kind of know about that. So we can go ahead and we'll assign a value to that. If folks want to chat in, this is where you would work with your collaborators. This option is we're using modified Fibonacci sequence, and so we can give them a relative value. And then you're polling your group to come up with, well, how big is this? So this one is collaboration. It's probably on the smaller side. And this one probably requires an alerting system and tooling. So relatively speaking, maybe instead of a 3, it's up near an 8. And what do we get? We get weighted shortest job first. For those that are familiar in SAFe and Donald Renardston's product development flow, this is one prioritization mechanism you can use to reach sort of an economically weighted commitment. So
Brian and James, if your audio is back, is this a moment when we start to see the group sort of embrace that disruption responder moment? Do they start to embrace that ownership of that, or do you start to see it earlier in the process? I'm just curious.
James, you want to try to take that? We'll see how your audio does. Yeah, it seems like it's working. Well,
Maybe not.
Anyway, also, yes, we sort of, yeah.
I think it's still a bit garbled.
Yeah, I think that's all right. I'll try to take it, and I've been around traveling and doing these with James enough that Hannah, I think my answer would be it won't happen earlier Like if you're in your first workshop, you've got to let the magic happen. I'd say after your second or third cycle with the same group, try to keep the same group. Um, just like you might with an agile team, you don't want to swap them out between cycles. That's when you really start to see the aha and the magic happen around using cadence-based continuous improvement and using data and simulation and economic modeling to drive commitment. And what starts to happen is after the first or second improvement loop, you'll get some ROI off of these. So I have in my ready bake oven, we'll jump in and look at one and then still leave about 10 minutes for Q&A. But the idea is, you go through, you have people do their share back, you really talk through and negotiate how this is going to get implemented, and you get consensus of the group. And when you get consensus from the group, you simply move it to committed. And that's a really powerful thing. I knew from years of working with CEOs, I'd have a great idea to improve something in my PMO or my engineering group. And the first thing the C-level executive would say to me is, yeah, but this is big and it's going to take cooperation from the other groups. How you have to prove to me that they've created buy-in. You have buy-in with those other groups. And that was often the hardest thing. And this naturally does that. You've already aligned on this. So when your stakeholders are saying, okay, we're really going to do a review and work with our suppliers, I now know, well, that came from all of the groups that are involved in this. So very, very powerful. And then I'll just show, like, once this is committed and you get it in your workflow tool, you come back a month later, it's going to ask you, how much did you spend and what was your time on that improvement? You can make any kind of comments or modifications to it. And that takes you to where you're able to show the ROI of these. So I took us all the way through getting the actual commitment into play. And then what I'll do is I'll just kind of show with a package delivery process how that looks. So this one has been scored and it's been through 4 improvement cycles. We sometimes call them improvement loops. And how that goes is usually the first one is about 2.5 hours. But after that, you get in a rhythm with these, and you can even do some of the activities asynchronously. I've seen after 3 or 4 of these, companies just naturally blend this into their normal meetings and cadences. It's maybe an extra half hour. It's not a heavy lift, but what's really powerful and galvanizing is we show the actual improvements in our flow time, and improvement trending in our flow efficiency goes up. And then we correlate that with the actual opportunity value over time. So this is some demo data. It's not the best example, but you should see consistent 1%, 2%, 3%, sometimes even 5 or 10% improvements in those top bottlenecks every quarter, every month. And it's that consistency in measuring the ROI that drives leaders and moves people to action around getting better and continuously improving. So it's a great way to become a hyper engagement and continuous improvement using visual simulation.
If I can just add one little anecdote, I don't know if you guys, I'm an SPC, right? We're covering SPC. I've actually done value stream facilitation workshops over multiple days. And I can tell you, I've been in a room with 30 people for 16 hours straight. And at the end of that 16 hours, did we have a completed value stream with the scores and everything in? Mostly, but do we have work for optimizations or even agreement on what some of the bottlenecks were? Not necessarily. For those of you on this call, you've been on this call for, actively for about 47 minutes. We've already achieved consensus on what the bottleneck is, what we need to work on, and you've already generated optimization enabler backlogs for work that you could begin executing this afternoon. How much faster is this than what you've seen in the past? and I'm not going to wait for a response because I already know what the answer is going to be, but it's so many orders of magnitude faster than sticky notes on a whiteboard that it should be blowing your mind right now.
All right. And I think maybe just to kind of wrap it all up, I don't see open questions coming in, but maybe Hannah, I'll turn it over to you to encourage folks to ask questions. And we can also show how you can connect with us and connect with Icon. So with us, if you would like to license the tooling, run your own workshops, and if you're a larger organization and you need help getting started, we have the experts through our partner network, like James and like Dalen, who do this all the time in some of the world's biggest organizations.
So while people are typing in their questions, a lot of the folks on the call are self-professed consultants. They're in the professional services world. I would love to hear sort of the stories from the field, your sort of before and after, you know, this is what it felt like before, this is what it feels like after story. If James, your audio is working, I'd love to hear it. Brian, your best before and after story. Dalen, your best before and after story. Give folks a minute to type while we're letting them type. Does that make sense? That was a convoluted question. I'm going to try it again. Brian, I would love to hear a story of you running a value stream mapping workshop in the before times, and then how that feels different now that you have the AI empowerment today.
I've got one that we just recently heard from a gentleman named Avi who worked with Jeff Sutherland on the original Scrum book. He said that several years ago he was working with a very large manufacturer up in Canada that was like the Mrs. Baird's Bread of Canada, the company that owns massive bread making stuff. And he said he was in a value stream session for 3 days with all the top leadership that had been at the company for decades, and his question was, show me the steps that happened between wheat in the field to sliced bread on the trucks. 3 days later, they couldn't figure out what the steps were to get from A to Z. For fun, we put this in on the nVeris tool in the platform, and it spit it out in 10 seconds. He's like, man, this would have saved me so much time and effort a couple of years ago. So it's not in it. And the important thing to point out is that it's the tool is giving you a really, really good guess, like a 90% good guess, which is enough to make business decisions on. As long as your group says, hey, that's good enough. We all agree that's the bottleneck. If we had $25,000 to make an improvement, that's where we should spend it. That's actionable business intelligence that you can start working on and executing against, literally within a couple hours of using this. That's powerful stuff, man. You want to model future disruptions and what ifs and how could we's? You can run through 50 different scenarios using this in an afternoon. That's powerful. That's powerful tools.
Hey guys, I think kids are home from school, and I think somebody was maybe streaming 4K on multiple TVs, or that just been... All right. Well, any other questions? We've got 2-3 minutes left. I think we still have 20 participants with us. Anything coming over in the chat?
No questions in the chat, but I do want to remind everyone that if you were looking for a recording from today's session or you were looking for the slides, they will be coming through in your inbox. And we do have a YouTube channel if you want to catch the recording and share it freely and openly. That'll be coming across in the next few days.
Okay. And we got a couple QR codes. So the first one will take you to nVeris.com, where you can see everything from how to run a workshop with tips, learn from the mistakes we've made over time, and most importantly, you can start a trial. You can activate a trial. And then we have a QR code for Icon, which covers all of their services and, the many companies that they've helped globally over the past decades.
Oh, do have a question that just came in from Walter. Thank you, Walter. Once the consultation is complete and the client is implementing recommendations, does the client need to have a license to do the follow-up or to identify trends, economic value, etc.? Thank you for that question, Walter.
Yeah, I mean, you could use the license. So if you have a license as an advisor or a consultant, we have a model that lets people partner with us. That's what actual Icon is, and then you can actually resell licenses at the higher tiers to get some revenue. But yeah, you want it's not a once and done. There's a great article that was just posted today on LinkedIn about how a lot of people do dive into value stream mapping, but they don't keep the improvement cycles happening, right? So it's not a static thing. It's a living, breathing tool. So we would always recommend that you stay in the tool and you keep using it, but it's a light touch in between sessions.
And just want to another plug for the collaboration aspect. In the old days of doing this, you'd literally have to have everybody in the same room to understand what the steps are. And the beauty of that QR code is you can have people globally distributed around the world that can immediately pop into and start contributing to the scoring and the voting and the generating improvements in the tool without having to go through any kind of tedious app download or any kind of thing like that. So it makes it very easy to use.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. We hope this was unlike a typical PowerPoint presentation. And you can follow us on LinkedIn and nVeris.com as well, and scan the QR codes. We'll leave them up for another minute. And thank you all for spending an hour with us.